Welcome to the Masculine Revolution, hosted by Jeremy Brown and myself, Murphy G. This is episode number 52 with Matt Kemmerer. We also got the great Alan Black with us.
Yeah.
Y'all doing good this morning?
Yeah, man.
Appreciate you coming on, man.
Well, I
sure.
appreciate y'all asking me to be a part of it. I've been really looking forward to this.
Yeah, man.
So I wanted to try something a little new this morning. Before we get into the topic, I got like 5 questions.
Okay.
You can just you can go first with your answer, and then I'll finish up last, and we can either talk about it or we can't. So the first question, and I pulled these like from the internet or whatever. First question is, who do you think will win 100 men versus a gorilla? One silverback gorilla.
It depends on which men.
That's true.
I know some pretty gnarly guys that might be able to fight a gorilla.
Yeah.
But I think if 100 guys
That's what I said.
really worked together and had a plan, they'd kill that gorilla, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
No
my
doubt.
2 cents.
Going with the
I
100.
wouldn't want to be the first 25,
No.
but after that,
Yeah.
you probably have a chance of having a strategy. You know?
Oh, yeah, you got to.
Yeah. Somebody's gonna have to make a sacrifice.
You got to get some big boys on that gorilla. Yeah.
Those first couple guys though gonna get ripped in half.
Yeah. All right. So question number 2 is 100 Americans versus 100 Brits.
100 Americans all day. You go with 50 Americans.
Okay. Jeremy.
50 to 100. That's what Matt said.
Okay. Cool. So we're going with home team. I like
Yeah,
it.
man. I got to go with America. You know what I mean?
All right. Did we go to the moon?
I don't know, man. I don't even waste my time thinking about stuff like that.
All right. Undecided. What
We
you
went
say?
to the moon.
You say we went to the moon. All right.
We went to the moon.
I won't hold it against you. Aliens, real or fake?
I don't know, man. I feel like there's something weird out there, but to call them aliens, maybe. I don't know.
Okay.
Something's out there.
Something's out there.
Something weird's going on.
Jeremy?
Yeah. I'm not on the alien.
We're in agreement
Plane.
on that.
Yeah.
Me either. All right. And then last one. And 3 music artists that you could listen to if you were stranded on an island. And all you could listen to were their discography.
Man, I'm real big into worship music, man. If I'm stuck somewhere, I want to be worshiping.
Okay.
I'd probably go with Phil Wickham, Pat Barrett, and Brandon Lake.
Okay. Jeremy?
Brandon Lake's on my list, but I'd probably say Leonard Skinner and Teddy Swims.
Okay, Teddy Swims. All right. Yeah, I got Drake, Frank Sinatra, and the Elevators. They all got crazy long discographies, so I feel like I'd be taken care of. So, but yeah, I just wanted to try that out this morning to kind of lighten the mood a little bit before we got into it. So, as always, we always ask our guests to kind of pick the topic they want to talk about, and you chose meeting people where they're at.
Right. Yeah.
You kind of want to walk us into that?
Yeah, man. It's there's a lot of people that are broken. I mean, we don't have to look hard and far to see it. You know, you walk out into the world, walk on job sites. I mean, even in our families, there's broken people everywhere. It's a battleground, and a lot of those folks, they're just not going to get it until they have somebody come alongside them and really stick it out with them, really going to pour into them, invest in them, sit down and listen to them, ask them their story, and just be there for them. No judgment, no condemnation, no sanctification. That's just not our job, and it's just there's a real big need for people to get after it. We're called to be the church, and it's not something that just happens on Sundays. We need to have an open heart for those that are broken and hurting in our communities and workplaces and families.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you prepare your heart for engaging in a relationship with others with that mindset?
just being open with God, saying it's all yours. Use me however you see fit.
Yeah.
Just trying to stay in a constant place of a heart. Well, I should say a heart posture of serving. And just keeping things real with God, so He can keep things real with you and allow you to be a blessing to somebody.
Yeah.
Be effective in how you minister. Be effective in the way you're trying to help them. You know.
Yeah, give me some practical application. Like, how does that, like, what does that look like? On a daily basis.
Well, just being intentional. When you're walking through what you got going on each and every day, just being aware of your surroundings. Don't get so busy that you miss what God's trying to use you for. Like I said, it's a real battleground out there. There's people laying on the ground just begging for help, and they just, the chances of folks just walking into the church nowadays for help is slim.
Yeah.
It's like a last resort for a lot of people, and even then, they're not going to do it. So it takes us just really, truly understanding the call and walking out and just doing what we're told to do, but doing it in a way that's graceful and kind and compassionate and loving. It's where, we're putting ourselves in a position for them to trust us, and when you establish that trust with somebody that's broken and they can trust you, that's when you begin to have some influence in their life. And once you have that influence, then maybe they'll start listening to some of the things that we're trying to pour into them. It's hard if we don't take the time to go and just sit with them. We don't have to say anything. We just need to listen. And when we listen, we really need to listen closely. Just kind of ask them questions, saying, "Hey, tell me your story.
Yeah.
Tell me your hurts. Tell me whatever you feel led to tell me. Just give me something to work with. And then it's important for us to sit there and listen. And then once we listen, then we can start building a relationship. We try to find some common ground, and just see where there's similarities, because those similarities and those common grounds are where they start relaxing and people start opening up, and that's when they really able to go deeper in that conversation and that relationship.
Yeah. You think, Murph? You think listening is a skill?
Yeah, for sure.
So, like, if it's a skill, then how do you think we can practice with developing it?
Well, if you're married,
That's first place to start.
first
huh?
place to start. Well, I mean, we're all grown men, but I mean, if there's younger folks that tune into this, younger men that tune in, just listening to your elders, man. Listen, your folks, your teachers, your pastors. Just listening and being obedient to what's above you already in life, and just really, when I think about listening, I just try to listen to what the Holy Spirit's trying to tell me. Because the Holy Spirit will guide you through these situations and help us build these relationships. It'll help us have the right questions for folks, and it'll help us have just an aim, and when we walk into these situations, to talk to these broken folks and just let the Spirit lead.
Yeah.
That's what I find to be most useful for me, is just being calm, listening, and just allowing the Spirit of God to lead me in conversations.
Mm-hmm. Is there any practices that sync up with listening that you do, like when you engage with somebody, that like first thing comes to my mind is, like, if you're having a conversation with somebody and you get done with the conversation and then you take a second to make a note, either pen to paper or on your phone or something like that. Like, is that something that either of y'all do ever?
I don't do that.
You don't do that?
No, I don't.
No, I mean, it's not a bad idea. I mean, if you have a hard time remembering stuff, especially, but genuinely, when I'm in a conversation with somebody and I'm really trying to understand what they're going through, it's something you remember when somebody opens up to you. You know, you tend to remember those moments. But it's not necessarily important that we respond right away. You know, maybe take some time, take it home with you. You know, wait a little while before you respond. That way, you've got some time to think about how I want to respond. What do I want to say, or what do you want me to say, God, in these circumstances and situations? You know, what would you like me to say? Just take some time to marinate on it. You know,
Yeah.
that way you don't just put your foot in your mouth, because we don't always get it right, man.
Yeah.
Our heart might be in the right place, but sometimes we're just not really listening, and what seems right in our minds isn't exactly the way we should go in the moment, and maybe we just need a little bit more time to think about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you know, for myself, I agree with you. Listening is huge. You and I have had this conversation before, where it's like, you know, you go to school and you grow up learning, and there's so much emphasis on learning how to communicate. You know, you start by learning how to talk, learning how to read, learning how to write. You know, all these things that are important, but it's always in an effort of projecting something in here and out, right?
Right.
But there's no classes on necessarily like tactics of actually listening and paying attention. You know, I mean, other than show up to a class at a certain time and pay attention to the teacher. You know what I mean? Like, you get told that your whole life, but like not techniques, I guess you could use, you know, for engaging with others. And so in a world where I think naturally we struggle to think of outside of ourselves as it is, but then you don't learn any skill sets of being able to listen at all, or techniques to listen, you know, then it just sets us up when we become adults, where it's just like a lot of conversations a lot of the time end up being you sitting there looking at the other person and thinking of what you're going to say instead of paying attention to what they're saying. You know, that's one thing that I've actually enjoyed about this context is it's given you know, me and Murphy a good chance to sit down and do just that. What you're saying is just literally just listen to people and what they have to say. You know, and that's the purpose of what we're doing is broadcasting some perspective for folks who want to tune in. You know,
Right.
But I think listening has a major factor in building relationship.
Absolutely, and just not just listening, but asking the right questions. You know, just spending some time, you know, going over some things in your head of what kind of questions you want to ask these folks, because some questions can be a little touchy. You know, and some questions may be better held for later once that relationship is built and trust is gained. And then, you know, you can start asking some of the harder questions, because a lot of people, man, you just don't even realize how broken they are. I mean, they've got a lot of stuff. We walk around and we put on our best face, you know, and a lot of times even in the church on Sundays, you don't know what's going on, you know, and people are broken, and sometimes they just need somebody to sit with them in their brokenness. We don't even necessarily have to ask questions or say anything at all. It's just being available to sit with them, you know, and then when they're ready, they're going to remember, hey, when I was going through it, you know, Murph was sitting with me, Matt was sitting with me, you know, Jeremy was sitting with me. Those are the times that they're going to come to us and say, hey, man, that meant a lot, because I remember when I was going through some stuff, and I remember exactly who was in the room, like to a T. I remember every bit of it, you know, and I'm forever thankful for those folks that, you know, they sat with me. They didn't say a word half the time. You know, sometimes the pain gets so real and so deep that people don't know what to say. You know, and sometimes it's just sit with them.
And it takes too like a level of discernment and maturity, because even listening to people, you have a choice with that. You can either feed the spirit that's on them at the moment, you know, like if somebody's like venting to you about something going on, you can either fan that flame, or you can just let it burn against you, you know. And sometimes it takes that maturity to be like, all right, he's really hot right now. I'm not gonna say things to pile on to make,
Right.
you know, to elevate these, you know, even if like I've had conversations with people where like I 100% agree with everything that they're saying and they're struggling with, and it's like the best thing to do is just to let them get it out. You know what I'm
Right.
saying?
Yeah.
And not really say anything at all.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? Because especially in those moments, you know, you could do real damage, and you know when people have emotions elevated and stuff.
Yep.
So, you know, there's definitely a spirit of you got to have some maturity and discernment to kind of tell when someone's actually looking to hear some feedback, or when someone's just letting it out. You know what I mean? Because you definitely don't. I mean, that's I try to like. I don't ever want to be the guy that just like, you know, I can tell you're upset by something. I just kind of just I remember.
Poke the bear.
Yeah, just kind of ag you on a little bit. So you know, it's definitely important to kind of have that, especially if you're going to be there as like in the sense of what you're saying, which is like ministering to people.
Right.
In that circumstance, you definitely, you know, you want to kind of get them back to that middle ground of being level-headed on stuff, you know.
And that even comes in the form of redirection. You know, you just kind of redirect the conversation and try to change direction and get their mind off of what's got them fired up. You know, and just bring up something else and see if we can go down that road. And a lot of times it works.
Yeah.
Sometimes it just doesn't. Sometimes people are so ticked off that they just want to vent, like you said earlier, vent. They're going to just keep going until it's over with, and just got to sometimes sit back and listen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you what do you think, like, you know, let's say you engage with some folks, you begin to build some relationship by listening, and trust, you know, begins establishing.
Right.
What in your mind is like, you know, the next step with in relationship with others as you're with the focus of ministering to people, like, and helping and serving, like, how do you continue to keep that fresh?
Testimony. Just sharing my testimony with folks, and just that's where people start seeing how broken we all are.
Yeah.
Realizing, hey, look, this guy's been through some stuff too, and then that just opens the door to go deeper. You know, when we've established that, hey, look, we're buddies. You know, I got your back. You can trust me. I'm not going to tell your secrets. You know, you begin, like I said, you begin to have influence, and once you have that all established, and you start sharing who you are, start sharing what you've been through and what God's brought you through, now you've opened the door to really start working. You know, you've opened the door to start telling people about Jesus, because that's the biggest part of my testimony is what he's done. It's nothing I did. You know, I didn't do anything besides surrender. I had no other choice but to surrender, because I was at the end of myself. I was done. And a lot of times that's going to go further than anything. Is our testimony is just saying, hey, look, this is who I used to be. This, obviously, you know who I am now, and it's all because of him. You know, that's when the ground starts getting broke up and seeds start falling in. That's when hearts start softening. That's when you start gaining perspective in their lives and say, hey, look, let's work through this.
Yeah.
You know, tell me what's important to you right now. Like, where do you want to go from here? Like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Like, start asking those type of questions. Positive questions that help people say, hey, look, I want to grow. I want to get out of this place that I'm at, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, all that. And I just want to get from where I'm at now to where you're at. You know, that just takes time. It takes time for us to come alongside them. It's got to be authentic too. I mean, people, they're going to see. They're going to know this guy's not authentic. He don't care. He's going to start looking at you like, what are you getting out of this? You know, hey, listen, I just want to see you. I want to see you better. I want to be with you. I want to walk with this whole situation with you, you know, And that testimony has so much power.
Do you see that people have a hard time on accepting that you don't really have an ulterior motive behind it?
No, I don't. Not really. I mean, there's been some folks that, that's the way they look at it. They're like, man, why are you doing this? Why are you not home right now with your family? Why are we sitting here for the last 3 or 4 hours crying and praying and talking? And it's like, man, because I've been in your shoes, I know what that pain feels like. I know what you're going through. And I had people that stood in the gap for me, and those are people I'll never forget.
Mm-hmm.
People that were instrumental in my conversion and my walk, and just being tools that God placed in my life, and I'm thankful for them. And I pray that when I'm ministering to somebody, or I'm just becoming more of a buddy, that people start looking at it like that. Like, I want to trust this guy. I want to help. I want him to help me. I've seen how God's working in his life. I want that.
Mm-hmm.
I pray that's the way they look at it, instead of, what you in this for?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. What about you, Murph? How do you tackle that in your mind on establishing where people view your actions with, there isn't an ulterior motive, or there's something in the background that you desire out of them?
Yeah, I think it's. It's just you can't take time out of the equation. It just takes time for. Like we talked about this morning. It's like you see a guy with character traits that kind of seem unreal, and then as time goes on, you watch him go through something, then all right, that's who he is for real. And so I think with time, it's just that's what relationships are. You gotta have time to establish that ground, because if you're out, out with the church doing an evangelistic thing, it's like, that might not be where you're gonna get all the meat of the relationship. It's gonna be the time you spent afterwards. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So it's just showing up for people, I think, over time. And like he said, no judgment when they go through stuff. You're still there. You don't just treat them like the world, I guess. That my whole thing is just like, it's got to be for real.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, I
gotta
was
be for
reading
real.
through Romans 14 yesterday,
Yeah.
and it pretty much is saying what we're talking about, which is pretty, God's timing on reading it. How Holy Spirit will do that sometimes, but it's rooted pretty much in the message is hey, you gotta focus on your walk and your relationship with Jesus and your convictions, and be obedient, and really don't worry about what other people are doing and how they're doing it, and beware of criticism.
Yeah.
But let your decision and that has led to the actions of how you're living be what's used to make the impact.
Yeah.
Not, well, let me see if I can get in here and change a person.
Right.
Or,
Yeah.
or help, or even when it seems as if, like, you're in the context of I'm helping this individual. I've been in scenarios multiple times where, having conversations, real life conversations with guys, and they're asking, hey, what's your thoughts with this? What's your thoughts with that? And early on, like, I'd be like, hey, yeah, here's my thoughts. And then you'd see them, agree. And then time would pass and they would be doing, like, you'd see the actions in their life and they'd be doing the exact opposite of the discussion. And my mind would be like, bro, like, we just had this conversation and we walked through these same circumstances and scenarios, and you're doing the complete opposite of what was discussed, And so, like, how can you expect.
Real
You know,
change takes time.
Yeah,
And
right.
that's the hard part about doing this. This the hard part about walking with people and pouring into people is, man, they don't always respond in a healthy way. Sometimes they fall back and then they come forward. It's like a 2 steps forward, 3 steps back type of thing, and that's where it gets hard on us. Like that's where it gets we get weary and like, man, I thought they were getting it. I thought I thought they were really growing. I thought they were really picking up what I was trying to put down in their lives.
Yep.
And it can be discouraging, man. It really can be. That's one of the hardest things is to just keep your head up when things don't go or they don't grow. And just stay there. Stay rooted. You know what it takes. We know what it takes to be rooted. We just got to keep watering that seed. Keep watering, keep pouring into them, keep being present, keep building that relationship. That last thing we want them to look at and think is, hey, I'm some kind of project. I'm some kind of charity case. Like, no, that's not it, man. You're important. God's got a plan and a purpose for you just like he does anybody else.
Yeah.
And it's just about us standing in the gap and staying immovable until they become more than just milk babies. When they start eating meat and they start growing in their faith, they start growing in their walk. And you'll see it when they start producing fruit. You're like, man, now they're going to go out and do the same thing that I just did for them. And that's the beauty of the gospel, man, is when people start getting it and start producing fruit, man, people around them come around us. The fruit's not for us. The fruit's for everybody around us. And when we start producing spiritual fruit in our lives, people start seeing it. People are like, man, I want some of that fruit. And then they want to go out and start doing the same thing. That's why it's so important for us to understand. It's not about checking boxes. It's not about us trying to be religious. It's not about us, trying to be better than anybody else. It's just about us doing what we've been asked to do. We were shown grace. We were shown love. We were shown forgiveness. We're supposed to do the same things for everybody else. And sometimes it just, back to the point of when people fall back, and it can take its toll. But, man, we just got to stay rooted, stay ready, and just wait for them to come back, and help them back. So, come on, man. Encourage them. Remind them. Say, hey, look how far you've came in the last 6 months or last year. Look at the lives that are changing in your family. Look at the father and the husband that you've become. Let's keep going. Let's go. And that encouragement goes so far. So far.
Yeah. I think encouragement's a big piece of the pie.
Yeah.
In that relationship piece. Because if it's radio silence across the board, the tendency for loneliness sets in. Where you feel like, well, even though you're trying to walk a path, and you're trying to be obedient, and you're trying to have a focus on what you've deemed important or value, but then there's no encouragement or there's no spurring on, it can get lonely out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, how do you combat that?
The loneliness?
Yeah.
A lot of prayer, seeking for understanding. You got to walk with God through those. I mean, always, but I'm just saying, especially when you start going through those valleys, you gotta lean on your training. Go back to just studying and letting the Word speak to you, because I feel like at those points it's not really there's not really a human encouragement that you're looking for if you're going through that kind of a time. When the walk is hard, it's not easy. So there's gonna be those times where you feel like unimportant, or like you're not making an impact or whatever. Like what I'm doing's not worth anything.
Yeah.
So I think you just have to combat those feelings because you're doing it. It tells us don't grow weary of doing good.
Yeah.
You know, and so although in this world it seems like when you do good, it's not all the bad stuff seems to be celebrated more than the good things. And so sometimes I can kind of be like, what am I doing? You know, but you just got to stay true to the mission, I think, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like when I get in a funk like that, I try to be mindful of my intake. It's what am I taking in on a constant basis of my day, you know, that's going to affect how I feel or how I think or how I act.
Yeah.
And I start thinking, okay, let's get back to the basics. Let's worship. Worship. It's hard to worry and be stressed out when you're worshiping. It's just try it. You know, if you're stressed out while you're worshiping, I'd try to go a little deeper in your worship because it's not how it's supposed to be. That's where I start. I go back to worship, man. It's like, okay, God, I don't feel right. I'm here for you. I love you. Pour yourself over me. I just want more of you.
Yeah.
And I find everything I need right there in the worship, and then just getting right back to it, man. Once I'm filled up, once I've intake all the good, the positive, I get the word, I listen to sermons, just fill myself back up with the goodness of God, and it's like time to get back to work, and it's hard, dude. It will wear on you, and you do get those places of loneliness and weariness and just burnout, and it's like, man, golly, I'm just tired. Like we were talking before we turned the cameras on. I'm in a season of busyness right now, but man, my phone rings. That's what I really want to be doing is talking to people. I want to continue building those relationships. I want to continue to pour into other people's lives, and because that's eternal value. That's this stuff of on earthly things and all the busyness of work and sports and all that, man, the stuff doesn't even matter in the grand scheme of things. It's like, man, this matters. This has eternal value attached to it.
Yeah.
These things right here, these are just, this is part of life, and it's a beautiful part of life, and I love it. But it does cause some burnout and weariness that affects the other side of ministry. It's like, man, you get around to actually getting your hands dirty, and you're beat down, you're wore out, and that's where we just got to go back to our source and just allow the source to fill us back up, and then we can go right back out there and start focusing on things with eternal value and things that truly matter.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely get to those moments where I'm like overthinking everything. So I have to I have to get back to a point where I can laugh about something, remember life is good,
Yes.
and
Go fishing.
yeah, something to put me back into putting a smile on my face, because sometimes I get to thinking too much. And, and them thoughts put me in a spot where I feel like I'm not doing enough. I'm stressed out, and it's like that ain't from God. So
That's right.
I have to get that back. You said something that at the beginning of this, that you said that the church is the last place some people will come.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
Because church has gotten it wrong so many times, and that's what I appreciate about Clint and Foundation is they're willing to talk about it, and they're willing to address the elephant in the room. Why does the church get it wrong? And a lot of that comes with folks getting a little too self-righteous and forgetting where they came from, forgetting the rut that Jesus drug them out of, and when you look at the Bible, it's like the religious folks were the ones that screwed it up. Those are the ones that Jesus had a problem with in the first place. And when we make it more about religion and rules and checking boxes than about building relationships and loving on folks, it's hard for people to want to be a part of a church that doesn't get it right. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It'll feel good for a while until it doesn't.
Do you feel like Jesus calls us to live to a standard?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that he says, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. And those commandments are not supposed to be grievous. They're supposed to be boundaries and where we live our life. It's like, okay, I don't go here not because I don't want to, it's because I love him and he asked me not to, you know, and because our flesh will get us every time, man. If we leave the door open for our flesh to act, it'll tear us up. It will tear us up and leave us hurt. And that's where if I got to remind myself, if I love Jesus, I need to do it his way.
Yeah.
And that's why it's important not to just know of Jesus, but to know Jesus and to have that relationship with him to where it's like, hey, I love you. And we got to remember what he did, the work on the cross. I mean, that breaks my heart every time I think about it. And that's what motivates me to slow down and build meaningful relationships with people. Because, man, he slowed down for me. I was wide open going down the path of destruction, and he slowed down for me. He said, hey, you don't want to go that way. I got something for you. Come on. And it just took me getting to a place in my brokenness for me to understand I can't go any further down. It's gonna kill me. And that's when I turned to Jesus and I was like, okay. And man, he was gracious and loving and kind and compassionate and all the things I wasn't used to. And he used his people, his church to chase me down. You know. And that I'll never forget. I was a broken man. I was as far gone as you could possibly imagine. And he used some really good, godly people to come after me. And that's why I feel so passionate about doing it for other people, is because he did it for me. It's like, man, how can I do that? I want to be used by you. That's my main thing. Is I want to help other people get out of that rut.
Yeah.
Before it's too late, because we're not promised tomorrow. And when we have that mindset, that timetable in our minds of, hey, look, we're not promised tomorrow. This eternal mission becomes bigger and stronger right now in my mind. It's like, hey, I got to go. It's time to go. I'm losing this battle with time. You know, it's time to get busy and actually do what we're called to do, instead of talk about it, instead of dream about it and think about it. Just do it. Just go. You know.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I think that that standard, it has to be accepted like in an indirect manner. You know, it can't be forced. When it's forced, some people embrace it and they'll attempt to live it out, you know, religiously, no pun intended, but like where it's like, okay, I want to hit these check marks and I want to focus on this, but then it becomes more about those check boxes, you know. But the standard is still there. I think that's the beautiful message of the gospel, you know, where it's like, look, it ain't about what you do and what you can and can't do, you know. I already did it.
That's right.
But I want you to practice it, you know. It's like I shared with Murphy the other day about on a text message on something that I read about discipleship, where, you know, you take Sermon on the Mount, which is really the first introduction of like a major teaching that Jesus does to a very large group of people, you know, and he starts it off with, hey, listen to my words and practice these things. And then he goes through a teaching, and then at the very end, he says the same thing over again. Take these words and go practice them, which means, if, you know, in my mind, when I think of the word practice, it's not that I'm doing something that I'm not necessarily perfect at. That's why I'm practicing it, is so that I can get more reps in. And as the more reps I do, the more proficient I get at it. But honestly, I never hit perfection. You know, I train jiu-jitsu, and there's this endless amount of, I mean, the art of jiu-jitsu never ends. You're always learning and adapting, and certain techniques work with certain body types, then and some it doesn't, and so then depending on whoever your opponent is, you're using different things. And so that takes years of practicing to where you can get proficient at doing particular techniques and them be efficient and get the result that you want on multiple different folks. You know what I'm saying? And so it's like life is the same, and your relationship with Jesus is the same. It's all about practice. It's when you wake up in the morning, it's how am I going to practice becoming more like Him? And study's a part of that, so that you're knowing what to practice. Prayer with having a conversation with Him to be encouraged in a supernatural way and keep your mind grounded. That's a part of it. Looking for opportunities in the middle of a day when, it's stressful, things are falling apart, nothing's going, you're not getting any wins, and you're just like, dude, I just want to win. Those are the moments, that it's time to, employ it, And so it's like, I think a lot of the time with your, with your question of like, hey, why would people not want to come to the church is sometimes the illusion of, hey, you can become like this, fill in the blank, like an upstanding, outstanding person that contributes to their community if you're involved with the church and that you're you're focused on Jesus, and you'll get there. That's the message that gets portrayed to people, and sometimes, and I think people hear that, and it's not that they negatively think, well, that's not what I want, but they just think, how is that obtainable? I don't think that's obtainable, and I don't think that that's necessarily the full truth. I think we're all humans that have the opportunity to practice the standard, but we're never necessarily going to achieve the standard. But that's okay, because that's what the gospel's all about. That's what Jesus came for.
Yeah.
He's like, look, I obtained it for you.
Yeah.
I did all the hard work.
Yeah.
You
Exactly.
just follow me.
Yep. And so I think what helps me at times, especially with connecting with others, is that, like you've said, Matt, it's like, hey, I've been there, I've had struggles, I still have struggles, but I'm actively practicing. So why don't you join me in that practice? And there'll be questions along the way, because we don't all have the answers. No one does, but He does,
Right.
and He's not necessarily going to reveal it like the writing on the wall, even though He could if He wanted to, and there's a possibility He does.
Yeah.
But a lot of the times, in my experience thus far in my life, typically He shows me the writing on the wall is the other lives in my life, and how we are interacting. And if you're not paying attention to that, you can just miss it. It can just go by. And so, but I think if you're in a natural flow of life and what our culture pushes people to live life by, I think it's extremely common to miss it. Because that's what Satan wants, is for us to miss it. And so that intentionality that you mentioned, Matt, I think comes out with the ones that are practicing and are focusing on their walk and their relationship, and it's overflowing into others, and that's where the impact really makes it. I mean, it's a little cliche statement, but like actions are loud, speak louder than words.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
But it's literally like the truth.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say is like, man, the most important thing in this whole thing is making sure that your actions match the words. You can't sit there and say one thing and then the people watch you live completely different, and if your words and your actions don't match up, it's gonna be really confusing for them.
Yeah. I think something that I've been realizing here lately for myself is personally, I'm a personality that tends to try to strive for excellence, like in everything that I'm gonna put my hand to, and because of that, I hold myself to a particular standard, you know, but that in itself can get in the way, where I think what the Holy Spirit's really speaking to my heart with is like, hey, be transparent with where you do fail.
That's right.
You know.
Yep.
And don't change the mentality of striving for excellence in everything that you do, you know. But let that attitude and those actions speak for themselves. But then be transparent with your failures, because people will pick up on the fact of, hey, this person or this guy or this girl they're living for something bigger than themselves.
That's right.
That will speak for itself, you know. But if you're sitting there saying, hey, I fell short here, fell short there, all of a sudden I think it makes it tangible for others to say, well, they're not that much different from me.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And so then all of a sudden it's like, well, you know, there's something inside of him or her that's at work that's bigger than them, and they're accomplishing things that I look up to and desire, but they're still failing. So now all of a sudden it's real.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just like this facade, you know. But that's, you know, there has to be some trust with others for that.
Trust and transparency, man.
Yeah.
That's good stuff right there. Because they like you said, they'll say, hey, man, before we even tell them anything about our struggles and stuff like that, they're already looking up to us. You know, they're already looking at us like, hey, but I want to get to where you're at. And then when we're transparent with them, it helps them take that next step in faith. Because a lot of people are like, man, I'm too far gone. God can't use me. I can't. I'm still doing this stuff. You know,
Yep.
And as a church, we need to say, hey, I got a spot right here next to me. Come sit with me.
Mm-hmm.
We still want you here. You know, we want you to. Guess what? I struggle with this. I struggle with this. You know, and when we're transparent with folks, man, it opens the whole door wide open. It opens the door wide open for them to say, okay, let's go.
Yep.
Next step.
Yep. Do you think it's easy, especially for let's just think through the lens of men, since that's who we are. Do you think it's easy? Is it an easy thing to learn to be transparent on your failures?
Yeah, I think it can be. I think that it can be hard. It also depends on how surrendered we are in the situation. You know, if we're saying, hey, look, I'm all in. You know, I want to use every bit of the tools I have in my toolbox to help these folks take the next step in faith, and that transparency and saying, hey, look, you know, it depends on how far you want to go with it. You know, because if you can share surface level transparency, or you can go deep. You know, you can really say, hey, look, this is how I used to really be. Mm-hmm. Like, let's go all the way to the rock bottom. Let me tell you what I really was into.
Yeah.
You know, what I was really about back in the day. And they're going to be like, man, seriously? Really? That you used to be like that? Wow. Look, God's letting you do all this ministry now? Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I remind them in the Bible. It wasn't a cleaned up, highly educated, act together Christian or Pharisee or religious people that Jesus chose to be his followers and his disciples. And so, man, these are some rough dudes. You know, when you look at Paul was rough, man. He killed folks, man. Mm-hmm. And Peter was roughneck fisherman. You know, he can use those who are broken, those that are far, and those that are rough around the edges, man. And a lot of times, those are the ones he really uses to do a lot of amazing things. You know, to reach some really lost folks.
That's true. I mean, look, he's using you, Murray.
Amen. You know. See how he does me, Alan? Jeez, man. Nah, that's 100% though, for sure.
Yeah, I think
sure.
it's also important to recognize, like, I mean, obviously you're not going to be you don't need to be one of those like oversharers, you know, because
Yeah.
trust is involved here, you know, in this context that we're talking about. But I also think that it's important to be real with yourself, you know, where like, yeah, like for me, for example, like, yes, God has transformed me. I'm not the same man that I was when I was, 20, right? Time passes, but at the same time, I still have these tendencies to have certain thoughts that come into my head that I know for a fact are not of God,
Yeah.
you know. But I still have the opportunity at that point to either put action to those thoughts or just to be like, all right, that's not. Recognize it for what it is. You know what I mean? Like that's not part of the standard that I'm being called to, and so I need to cut it out. I need to remove that immediately. You know, but I think it's important that people that you're engaging in with the relationship know that because a lot of the times, in my experience, people will. I think it's a human tendency to take a look at a certain individual's life that would be considered what someone considers successful, and people automatically kind of put them up on a pedestal, right? To say, oh, well, like they must not feel this way or think this way or act this way. You know what I mean? And I think it's important for those people that are receiving that type of perspective from others to say, no, like, yeah, I'm not necessarily acting on this stuff, but like I still have these thoughts, like you said, the word flesh. You know, it's a pretty churchy word that majority of people, wouldn't necessarily understand. I would say that it's ego, which a lot of people would, a lot of non-believers would be able to connect with the definition. But it's where like I want what I want when I want it, and I also want others to perceive me in a particular way. So that's so you make decisions based on that being the foundation of what you're making a decision on. And I think that's the transformation, is to take your ego from being up here as far on the priority list of how you make decisions and subordinating that, to, in our case, we're followers of Jesus. So we're subordinating our ego and what we want when we want it to what he says. But that doesn't mean that the ego goes away. And I think that sometimes can be the frustrating point from people, especially when they first dive into their relationship with Jesus, is like, okay, I've accepted Jesus, I've been baptized. The church says things are going to, people are telling me things are going to change, but then I'm still in this scenario where it's like, I'm having the same thoughts that I had yesterday, and you might it might not be in that time frame, you might be on this little high of like, I'm going to go crush it, for the kingdom, but there's going to be days where you're like, okay, I'm still behaving like I used to behave, or I'm thinking what I used to think, and that's where it's like, look, that's part of the gig, Don't beat yourself up over it, The goal is let's go to the easiest, the low-hanging fruit, that everybody can kind of connect with, like diet and exercise, right? Everybody knows, for the most part, if you clean up your diet and you exercise, you're going to have results. But yet, look at the statistics of the majority of the people in America. It's not, and nobody's going to sit there and say, I'm not interested in being healthy. Like, rarely do you hear people say, I don't care, I don't want to be healthy.
I just don't have the discipline to do it.
Yeah.
Type of,
And so, it, but you do something else, and that's talked about in the New Testament a lot. And so I think that recognizing that it's like, look, it's a part of a transformation process. But honestly, the transformation, yes, you'll be a different person in 20 years if you continue to focus on being obedient to this to Jesus and his standard, right? But it ain't never going to end and ain't never going to go away, the struggle and the draw for your ego to be up here rather than here. And I think that should be a large message to folks where it's like, look, your life will change 100% for the better. But there's always going to be this looming thing that's like always after you to get you to trip up, you know? And so just let go of it, you know, and relax a little bit. Like you were saying, you know, smile.
Yeah.
Just let it remind you and keep you focused on the fact that that's why we have to have Jesus. That's why he's so essential in our everyday life. It's not just something we do on Sundays. It's a lifestyle of worship, a lifestyle of prayer, a lifestyle of just seeking his face and his will in our lives. And to a new believer, that sounds kind of crazy talking like that, but that's exactly what it is. It's just going back to our source every chance we get. Go back and say, fill me up, show me I didn't get this right. Show me what I need to do. Just being transparent with God. Just being transparent and saying, hey, look, I didn't get that right. Forgive me. Point me in the right direction. Let's try it again.
Yep.
Let's try it again.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's important to meet people where they're at. But I think that, you know, not to sound religious here, but keeping God's commandments or the laws, like those things will change your life, you know, more than, you know, and in my own experience, people always want to know like what you did or what changed, but you're either working out or you're not, right? I mean, you can't get bigger without working out, right? I mean, we all agree on that.
Yep.
So the same with our Christian walk is you're either putting in the work or you're not.
That's right.
And I'm down to meet you where you're at. And I love people because that's what Jesus tells me to do. And I remember what he's done for me. So if there's a chance, then obviously I have compassion. But at the same time, if we're talking about you wanting to change your life, like you say, I'm going to get in shape and work out. But you come to the gym and just look at the weights all the time.
It's intimidating, isn't it?
You see what I'm saying? It's like, do you really want to get healthy or do you not? And that's really what we have to ask people is like, it don't matter about what church you go to, wherever you plugged in at, but you got to make the effort towards that. And that's, to me, has got to be the emphasis that when you accept this life, you accept Jesus and you submit yourself, there are other steps past that than just that initial,
right?
You know, like you've gotten to this point where you are, and that wasn't just that one day or that one time where
that's right.
You had that feeling where you're like, all right, I'm totally submitted now. After that, there was steps that happened after that.
Yeah.
Not to be religious, but I'm just saying you either practicing the way or you're not.
It comes with sacrifice, man.
You're either practicing the way or you're not. That's all there is to it. I mean, if there's 4 Sundays in a month and that's the only 4 times that you read your Bible, are you practicing the way or you're not? You showing up and looking at the weights. You know, that's where, to me, it's like, you know, I mean, there has to be an emphasis on what changed my life. Jesus, in the way that he says to live, that's what changed my life. Not a feeling, not thinking about it, but living out the things that he says to do, you know, and nobody gets it right, you know, but that doesn't change the fact that standard is the way that will change. It's not a thing to loom over me, like to keep me under a thumb.
Right.
These are literally the rules for freedom. If you want freedom from what you're feeling, then follow these things. You're not going to go wrong with that. So I think that's, to me, is like when people ask, like, what's the difference? Like, that's the difference. I submitted and I stopped approaching it with such an ego, like someone's trying to control me. Like, no, me got me into those situations. I need something bigger than that to get me out of this and to lead me in the right way, you know? And so to me, it's like, I'm down to meet people where they're at, you know, but once you make a decision and you profess with your mouth, now it's time to put the work in. You know, we got to get busy here, or we're just staring at the weights.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's
And I
just,
think the staring at the weights is what makes people say, actually, I'm not going to go to the hospital to get any better.
right.
You know, I'm actually not. That to me is like counterintuitive. I'm not going to go to the place where I should be welcomed and accepted, you know. And that comes from people just staring at the weights and saying, "No, this is a gym."
Yeah, that's
you
a
know?
part of that's part of a that's part of a good strong relationship though, is accountability.
Yeah.
You know, when we're walking along with these folks, I mean, there's a process in which we do it to where we don't just scare them off in the first place or run them
Yeah.
off. Like, you know, you go too hard too fast, and you know, like the gym, for instance, you go to the gym and you go in there with the hardest workout straight out the gate, man, you ain't going back. That soreness, that pain that you feel in your body the next 2 days, it's going to keep you out of the gym.
Yeah.
Same thing with faith, man. We go too fast, too hard, too soon, and it's going to scare them off. You know, they're going to listen to that crap. It hurts too much. You start calling out sin straight out the gate, it's going to hurt them. It's going to run them off. They're going to be like, I ain't ready for this. I don't want this. That hurts too much.
Yeah.
You know, that's why it's important to just take it in steps. Gradually build that relationship, build that trust, begin to have influence. And once you have influence, start building accountability.
Yeah.
And say, look, it goes both ways, buddy.
Yeah, I'm
Hold
not.
me
I'm not
accountable.
necessarily talking about calling out sin, but I'm saying when those times arise, like for in my own life, people have asked me like, you know, what changed? Like, man, what's, you know? And it's like there's literally no secret here. I literally just started reading and trying to apply what I'm reading,
That's
and
good.
I care about Jesus' words.
That's right.
Other than that, there's nothing outside of that. Like,
That's how we get to know them.
that's what I mean is like, and when you try to like soften it, like, you know, it's like, oh, you know, you can be who you are. And my thing is like, there's going to be a change. What you're asking me for is a radical change in your life. That's
it.
what you're searching for.
Even Jesus said, do you want to be healed?
That's what I'm saying. And so those are to me, it's like you know, I'm down to sit. I got friends who've told me straight up, they're not interested in it. I'm still friends with them.
That's right.
You know what I mean? Like, and it doesn't change the fact that I'm your friend, but it's just like, I understand that like at a certain point, you're either going to see the difference or you're going to say, yeah, exactly. There's no difference between us. That's why I don't care about it.
Right.
But how am I to live out that difference? By upholding the commandments, right? Because that's what sets me apart.
Consistently.
That's what I'm saying is that's why to me it's like not to be religious, but like these things are important because that's what sets us apart.
That's right.
It's literally the thing that sets us apart. It's not the like I said, not like, oh, I'm better than this person, but I want to be inspired when I look to the man next to me that's following the same thing.
That's right.
Not because I want him to tell me you're doing a good job or you're not doing a good job, but I want to be inspired. But I don't want to be by a man and then 5 years later I found out the whole time he was beating his kids and cheating on his wife.
Right.
Those are the things that like kill it. You know what I mean? So to me, you know, I said a cuss word today or whatever. You know, we all are going to slip up or whatever. That's fine.
Yep.
But I'm talking about is like the big deal things that come down to your heart.
Yeah.
That showed like your heart just was never in it.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so
No,
those
it's
are
the
the
foundation
things,
right there, man.
yeah. And so those are the things where I'm saying like you have to have a love for the commandments and to want to uphold the law in a certain way, or you're telling him ego-filled things about what I think worked for me. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So, like I said,
There's
I
a
love
standard for sure.
Yeah, I love the meet people where they're at, but I just always like, are we just like if I was extremely overweight and I went to the gym and the first thing they did was hand me a donut and tell me, "I'm glad you're here today,"
Yeah.
I'd be like, what is this? You know? And so that's all I'm saying is,
I still eat the donut though.
right? But, you know, it's just like those things of people want change and they want to see the change. And when you say stuff like, oh, the church is the last place they go, to me, the problem is that we've tried to relax too much. Yes, love and have compassion and understanding for people, but there's still like God is plain as days. Like this is right and this is wrong.
It's called repent.
Right. And so that's where I'm just like, sometimes the everybody's welcome, which they are welcome, but Jesus calls us to change and to submit, not to stay where we're at. Does that make sense?
No, you still got to tell them the truth.
Yeah.
You still got to hold them accountable.
Yeah.
And there's still, there's other parts to it.
Yeah.
And it's just getting to a point to where you have that influence for them to be able to trust you and listen to you.
Yeah.
Because if they don't understand you, trust you, respect you, your information holds very little weight in their life. If you don't have any influence, they don't want to hear that.
Right.
But once you gain that trust and influence in somebody's life, they're ready to go to war with you. And that's when you start saying, "Hey, look." That's when you start nudging them, like, "Hey, man, ain't a guy who called. That's not who God called you to be.
Yeah.
What are you doing that? What are you thinking? Is that who your wife needs you to be? Is that who your children need you to be? That's part of accountability. It's important.
Yeah.
Accountability. Without it, man, where are the rules at? Like you said, we want everybody to feel good and everything like that, but at the end of the day,
the rules are how you feel good.
That's it, man. That's how you take the next step.
Yeah.
It's just progressions, man. Just one day, get better the next day, get a little bit better the next day, get stronger and stronger and stronger, and then while you're doing it, man, you're sitting there drinking the truth, man. That's the part that I really love. It's like once we get past and you start eating some little bit of meat, I can start pouring it on. Now we can start dissecting the Word of God together. Now we can start digging. Now we can start really doing the laying of the blocks. We done poured the footers. Now it's time to put some walls up.
Yeah.
And that's when things get fun. That's when, hey, look, once they've turned the page and they're like, I'm a disciple now. I want to go.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, man, let's work.
Yeah.
Let's go to work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right on.
Any closing thoughts?
Oh, man. Yeah, man, I just want to encourage anyone that's listening or watching or anything, man, just don't overthink it. Just go. Just go and assess your environment, and you'll see a need. You will see a need, I promise you.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody in your environment today, not tomorrow, not next week, not next month, today is ready for you to take your faith serious.
Yeah.
And just go sit with them, ask them their story, figure out what makes them tick, and then keep going, just day after day, just get closer and closer, and just be Jesus, be like Jesus in everything you do.
Right on. Jeremy?
I'm going to go back to the beginning with listening. In today's culture, it's super fast. Everything's happening real quick, and I really firmly believe, like Jesus said, our battle isn't against flesh and blood. It's against the principalities that we don't see.
That's right.
And so recognize that we are at war and that Satan is literally going after your mind, because if he can control your mind, he's going to control your actions.
That's it.
And so listen to folks. Slow down. And not just hear words, but seek to understand. Seek to understand perspectives from others. And I think when you begin to grasp some understanding, then a lot of walls are broken through, and trust is replaced with the walls, and then you can be a witness of the Holy Spirit's work.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, I like what y'all said, man. Y'all about summed it up. you know, I just think being authentic, you know, care about people for real, not
Yes.
just to like feel good of like checking the box. Like I talked to one more person today, you know, just be authentic about it. Just care for people for real. Play the long game, and
There you go.
read your Bible. Read your Bible. And yeah, I think that's about it. Yeah, man, appreciate you coming on and
I appreciate
and bringing
y'all
this
Yeah,
topic
inviting
up
me,
with
man.
us,
I really enjoyed this.
Yeah,
I
appreciate
I
you.
think it's a good thing that y'all are pulling men in here and just asking hard questions and trying to figure out, you know, how do we get better
Yeah.
at being men,
That's what it's all about.
men of God, men of our, you know, husbands, fathers, the full circle. How do we get better?
Yep.
And this is good.
Appreciate that.
Keep going with it.
Appreciate that, man. Definitely. As always, y'all can reach out to us at Masculine Revolution on Facebook, masculinerevolution@gmail.com if you want to send some comments. We'd love to see your comments under the video. Till next time.
Join the family.
Yes, sir.